Additional protections have been built in to ensure informative and regular communication between the program and board, and that the board is notified if a participant withdraws or terminates from the program. This includes physicians and surgeons who voluntarily self-refer to the program, which provides much greater consumer protections. Again, amendments that enhance consumer protections have been taken, including complying with the uniform standards regarding substance abuse healing arts licensees that are found in other wellness programs currently operating in the state.
Number 3, doctors with these disorders, just like anybody else, will not come forward to get treatment or will come forward to access the program unless the program is kept confidential. The names and identities of program participants shall remain confidential unless the participant is not meeting the requirements and conditions of their treatment agreement, or they enter the program as a condition of probation, board action, or are subject to current investigation.
So there is no diversion at all in this bill. There's no diversion from disciplinary action from the board. And also we have language that makes clear that whoever's in the program must comply with the tenets of the program. And we included the Uniform Standards Act. So the opposition raised concern about that, and we did include that specifically. But if someone fails a urine test or they don't show up for a urine test, the goal would be that under the language that we took, where it's required that the physician and surgeon is in compliance with the conditions and procedures in the agreement, that requirement for compliance, it is our intention, would require that they actually show up for the tests and that they do them.
You've heard much testimony or some testimony referring to the fact that there are private organizations that physicians can go to. If you go to a private organization, you are completely confidential. No one in the state knows that you are seeking that kind of care. They know about individuals that are referred to those things through board actions and things of that nature, but no one knows. So therefore, as the physician community is looking at levels of addiction within the general public and trying to have some comparison to whether or not we have identified and are treating the number of physicians dealing with this illness within the profession, because it should be somewhat consistent with the general public. There's no way to evaluate that because all those individuals are in, as the senator said, in hiding in the shadows. So what this bill does is it really smartly looks at how do we bring those individuals out so that the medical community, and more importantly the medical board, can look and see, are we close to individuals that from a statistical perspective should be dealing with this illness, this disorder? What do we need to do to increase awareness? What other steps do we need to take? And so there's that aspect of dealing with it. And so from your sword and to go to your other point of your sword and your shield analogy, there's really a spectrum when you're talking about substance abuse disorders, which has been recognized as a chronic illness for a while now. And that spectrum goes from illness to impairment. What we try to make certain of, and absolutely certain of, is if a physician is impaired or even has the hint of impairment, that physician is immediately known to the board, and they do not have that level of confidentiality as someone who is purely dealing with an illness. Because an individual that's purely dealing with an illness, I think everyone would agree, should not be subject to discipline simply for the fact that they're seeking treatment for an illness. What we're trying to capture are the individuals and the physicians that are impaired or have the hint of impairment, which is why the confidentiality in the bill only surrounds a physician that self-refers and is not under a current investigation. Again, a current investigation doesn't mean that the issue is concluded. It simply means that the medical board suspects that there could be something wrong. And we think that once the medical board suspects that there could be something wrong, the confidentiality of the physician participating in that program should be pierced. Because, again, in that scenario, there is the hint of impairment, and therefore the necessity of patient safety takes precedent over the confidentiality. The question was, if an individual drops out, does that trigger a patient notification? Correct. The answer to that question is no. And the reason the answer to that question is no is because it triggers a medical board notification. The medical board then has the authority to take whatever the appropriate action is to protect patients safely. Therefore, if the medical board issued an allegation, that information would then be posted on the website under existing law. If the individual received probation, again, that information is disclosed on the website under existing law. Under existing law, there isn't a patient notification factors. But, as I think someone hinted to earlier, if that law changes, then the actions of the medical board would change consistent with the law.
It is also potentially the intent of the bill when someone who is in the program fails the requirements of the program to be notified, that the board be notified of that so that the board can take action potentially that might end up being disclosed. The problem that we have, and I hesitate to do this given the lateness of the hour, but given the importance of the bill, I can show you in the mock-up where the drafting problem is when it comes to the notification, because one provision, for example, of the bill unambiguously says that the uniform standards apply. That's great, because the uniform standards have in them different kinds of referrals to the board based on how the participant might fail. So, for example, the uniform standards say that the board must be notified when there are all violations of the program, not just treating a patient while you're drunk, or not just having a dirty test, but when you fail to show up for group, or when you fail to submit sufficient paperwork. All violations under the uniform standards have to be reported. But if you look at one of the provisions of the mock-up, it says the administering entity shall have a system for immediately reporting a physician or surgeon, that's good, who withdraws or is terminated from the program. Stop. That's just withdrawal and termination. Now, the uniform standards that are mentioned earlier would take care of that, but here in this section later on in the bill, it only says withdraws or terminated. Likewise, that same section, which is F on page 15 of your analysis in the mock-up, the administering entity shall not provide this information to any other individual or entity unless authorized by the physician. Stop. There's a uniform standard that says that under particular conditions, the hospital has to be notified. The supervisor has to be notified. So which one controls? The one that's later and more specific, or the earlier one that is more general but clearly comprehensive? So the protection against the absence of a patient being notified that a physician is in this program, and that, remember, this is a drug and alcohol addicted physician who's seeing our family members. The protection against being notified is absolute 1,000,000% clarity that the uniform standards apply. Why? Because that's how the medical board finds out about it, and that's how the medical board takes appropriate steps.
And as long as the confidentiality should be allowed to remain in force to struggle through their substance abuse problem, as long as someone does not have a restriction on their license, on their practice, truly is not entering the program because of the hospital where they've been privileges told them that they had to enter a program, not enter it because the board told them as a condition of discipline. These individuals should be allowed to move forward with the program as long as that their hospital didn't, because of their actions, or maybe they're not performing up to the standard and the hospital says it. If it's at that point, then that needs to be reported to the board. But if they truly are and I think everyone in this room is on the same page. I frankly do, because I wouldn't support this unless it met those 14 standards. And one of those is the uniform standards that we talked about. And so if the language needs to be tweaked a little bit to make that clear, crystal clear, that it's the uniform standards, that's not a problem at all. It's not diversion. There's no diversion allowed in this at all. If someone poses a risk to patients at a hospital, and they cannot be an excuse to avoid the board, and they're going to have to go through it. It's also key that it ensures that the board will be made aware when a participant withdraws or has a problem of any nature, if they miss a test, because that's within the uniform standards. If they don't test, if they don't show up at the right time, if they don't do something, then they should go directly to the medical board and do not. Senator Wieckowski, did you? No, they should not be allowed to to continue. And the language that's proposed in the analysis, I think should be changed to further ensure that those uniform standards are correct. And I think that will be, and I think you're agreeable to do that we can make sure. And also that a physician surgeon with substance abuse issues can confidentially participate in the program only if they do not have a restriction against their practice. And I think that's another amendment that I want to make sure that you'll accept, and that's in the analysis today as well.
I want to just say with respect to the medical board, I think they have to do their job. I think part of the problem is that there's some real question. They have to be a lot more, we're putting a lot of trust and confidence in the medical board to do its job, and I hope that they will do so. I've so far not been overwhelmed, especially listening to the testimony of these people today. The board has to be much more aggressive and work with the medical association, and certainly everyone's entitled to their due process. But remember, the goal is to do no harm. And with that, I will move the bill.
Very good. Thank you, Senator. We do have a motion from Senator Jackson. Please call the roll.
Motion is due pass to Senate Judiciary Committee. Hill?
Aye.
Hill, aye. Bates? Aye. Bates, aye. Berryhill? Block? Aye. Block, aye. Galgiani?
Aye.
Galgiani, aye. Hernandez? Aye. Hernandez, aye. Jackson? Aye. Jackson, aye. Mendoza? Wachowski? Aye. Wachowski, aye.